Hi everyone! Welcome back to this week's episode of Hand the Mic Over. I'm your host Mavish, and today I have a very special guest with me who has graciously agreed to come on the show and share his experience growing up in Toronto as a member of the Tamil culture. So without further ado, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, hi, my name is Abbi, and I'm very excited to be on this podcast.
Thank you so much. Would you mind sharing which general age range you're from and which countries you're associated with?
Yeah, so I am in my early 20s, and I'm Canadian. I was born here, and my parents are from Sri Lanka.
Very nice. For any listeners who may not be familiar with where Sri Lanka is in the world, can you give us a general geographic location?
Yeah, so Sri Lanka is located in Asia, and you can find it on a map right under the southernmost part of India.
Do you know which languages are spoken over there?
They speak Tamil, Sinhalese, and English.
Can you speak any native languages?
I do speak Tamil, yes.
All right. I want to learn a word in Tamil, and it has to be appropriate.
Yeah, so in Tamil, when we see someone and we want to greet them, we say vanakkam, which means hello, and you can also say it when you're saying goodbye.
Bonakkam?
With a V, vanakkam.
Oh, vanakkam.
Yes.
Vanakkam. Very nice to have you on the podcast.
Great pronunciation.
Thank you. Which culture do you feel like you associated with first? Sri Lankan culture or Canadian culture?
Personally, I've always felt like I associated with my Tamil culture first, and that's just because my first exposure to any language is from my parents, and I grew up in a Tamil-speaking household. So up until the age of 4 or 5, when I first started going to school, I was mostly exposed to the Tamil language and all the culture that comes with it.
So when would you say you adopted being Canadian as part of your culture as well?
Actually, as a kid, I did watch some English TV shows. I remember watching Barney. That was one of them.
Classic.
Yeah, and things like the Teletubbies. So I did get some exposure there. And, just over time, as I started going to school, making friends from different cultures and just kind of finding a way to incorporate the Canadian culture as I got more exposed to it.
So you're saying it was more of a gradual change?
I'd say so, yeah.
Okay. What was the general demographic like of the neighborhood you grew up in? What kind of communities lived there?
So right now we live in Scarborough, and Scarborough is a very multicultural place. There's a lot of different ethnicities here. I'd say there's also a lot of Tamil people that live in my neighborhood, as well as many other South Asian cultures. We also have some East Asian people from the West Indies. So yeah, I'd say it's a good mix of a lot of different cultures.
Growing up, did you ever feel like you were a minority in your neighborhood or in your school?
Not so much in my neighborhood, but I would say at school, yeah, I did feel that a little bit, just because there were definitely students from other cultures, but I do feel like there were definitely a lot of white people as well, so I did kind of get that feeling a little bit.
Which kind of friends did you find yourself gravitating towards?
I do find that I tend to lean more towards people with cultural similarities, because I felt those people were more relatable, we had more in common.
I asked that because in past interviews that I've done, a lot of people have been saying that they either became friends with people who were not from their community and then they felt very isolated, or they felt like they weren't understood, or they gravitated towards people who could understand them and just happened to be people from your similar background.
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
Yeah. Have you ever felt that you were not Canadian while living in Canada?
I'd say for me personally, I've always learned that, Canada is a multicultural place. It's very accepting of all different ethnicities and cultures, and has a lot of diversity. And so, although I did feel like a minority within the community, I can't really say I never felt that I was Canadian, just because in my mind, I've always associated Canada with being such a multicultural place.
And that's pretty accurate too. Canada is a country which is built on immigrants, so definitely. When you started going to elementary school, being a minority, was there ever a point where you felt like something was happening in school or in your friend group or even just in general in your community that made you feel like you didn't belong there?
Most of my friends were, like I said earlier, from the same or similar cultural backgrounds. So in that sense, I felt like we kind of just stuck within our own group. So I wouldn't really say I felt left out just because I did have my own group, or I wouldn't say I didn't belong just because I did have those similarities with my group for the most part.
So basically having your community by your side really helped you to feel like you belonged here.
Yeah, definitely.
How was Sri Lankan representation for you growing up? Did you see a lot of it? If you did, what were some places where you saw it happening?
I can't say that I have seen a lot of representation for Sri Lanka. And I think that's still the case. To be honest, I feel like a lot of people, maybe they haven't heard of it or they don't know where it is. For example, like a lot of the Tamil movies that we do watch, most if not all of them are from South India and not really from Sri Lanka. So I'd say, yeah, the exposure definitely isn't up there. But Tamil culture in general, I feel like some people may be a little familiar with it just because we've been in Scarborough and Toronto for a long time now. People have gotten the chance to know who we are.
Were there ever any cultural events which the community could come and learn more about Sri Lankan culture through?
We did have this thing called Tamil Fest. It's like a big street festival. They close down the street for a couple of days and we have these cultural events. That really was like our big event.
What was being done to promote your culture there?
For us, we had a lot of cultural programs. We had a lot of like cultural dances, songs, a lot of performances of like our cultural arts. And then we also had a lot of booths with our cultural food, cultural clothes. There were some vendors as well, so you could buy Tamil clothes, Tamil food. It's a 2 to 3 day event, mostly just like cultural arts, cultural food, cultural clothes. Yeah.
And this happened in the northern Scarborough area. What was the turnout like over there?
The turnout's always been pretty good. It's always been, it's a pretty big event, I'd say. We've always had hundreds, if not thousands of people come. It usually happens every summer, 1 or 2 days a year. So yeah, I think it's a good turnout most years.
Wow. Did you growing up see a lot of people from other races attending this, or was it more for the community itself?
I'd say it's more for the community itself. Personally, I haven't really seen people of other races attend. There have been some politicians come in the past. I believe Justin Trudeau did come maybe 1 year or a couple of years. But other than that, I haven't really seen people of other races attend the festival.
But I think that's really important to bring up. Having a festival and having so many people from your culture showing up can make a huge difference in feeling like you belong.
Oh yeah, for sure.
When you came into middle school and high school, would you say that you still had a similar friend group around you, similar community around you?
I would say so, yeah, just because the high school that I went to was my home school, and so it was dependent on my area and the neighborhood that I lived in. So a lot of my friends that I went to elementary school with were also in my high school. And even in my high school as well, I'd say there's a lot of people of South Asian background. So yeah, it was easier to, same thing, to relate to them. We had a lot in common.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned that there were a lot of South Asians. Did you see people who were from different countries in South Asia being more represented than Sri Lanka?
I'd say it's about the same actually, just because there were a lot of people of like Sri Lankan Tamil descent, and I'd say there were also like an equal amount of people from other South Asian countries. So I'd say it's about the same in terms of representation.
For me, I grew up in North York, and I honestly did not grow up hearing or seeing anything about Sri Lanka. I didn't see anything about Pakistan either. It was always India. That was sort of the main South Asian general culture that we got sorted into.
Yeah, I feel like I can relate to that. I feel like a lot of people who may not be familiar, they kind of just look at us and they'll be like, oh, they're from India or they're Indian. I can definitely relate to that.
Yeah. Not just because you were Sri Lankan, but just because you were from South Asia. Do you feel like you faced some sort of lack of acceptance in society here?
In my day-to-day life, I wouldn't say I really felt that. I will say, with the increasing amount of immigration and the increasing stigma associated with that, I feel like a lot of people will just look at you and be like, oh, you're probably an immigrant or you probably share some kind of culture with the people who immigrate here. And because of that stigma, I feel like maybe there's some, I wouldn't personally say it's hardcore discrimination, but more so you'll get some judgment, some negative impressions just because of that. But on a daily basis, I wouldn't say I deal with that.
Yeah, that's definitely a rising issue that's happening now with society and culture here in Toronto, and even all over Canada in general, from what I'm hearing. I'm really glad that you brought up that having your culture around you growing up and having friends who understood you and understood your culture played a huge role in being able to be so confident in your culture and in yourself and not worry about facing racism or not having any personal experience with that. I think you're the first guest we've had on the show who has mentioned that they did not face any discrimination growing up. Definitely a very big relief to hear that there's a part of Toronto where a certain culture, despite being part of a marginalized community, is indeed accepted.
Yeah. And yeah, I think that goes back to, I can't speak for all South Asian backgrounds, but in terms of Tamil Canadians, we've been here for a very long time now, just because, a lot of people immigrated back in the 80s to escape from a civil war that was happening. So I feel like over time, at least in the Scarborough region and Greater Toronto area, I'd say, people have had some time to become familiar with us.
Absolutely. And it's funny you mentioned that because we were just talking about the immigrants coming from South Asia now, and there have been a lot of brown people living in Toronto for a long time, but it seems like the opposite is happening instead. So it's concerning to see which direction the acceptance of our culture and our society is heading towards, but hopefully having such a large community will help to reduce the negative impact that people might face because of their race or their background.
Yeah, I hope so too.
So, have you ever traveled to Sri Lanka before?
I have, yeah. I've been there 3 times.
I'm assuming you were a child when you traveled there?
The last time I went was 2018, so not too young, but I still do remember my trips from there.
Let's get into that a little bit. What would you say are some differences in terms of Toronto culture and Sri Lanka culture? And I know I'm sure that there's many differences, but maybe something that someone living in Toronto would not really be aware of.
I'd say for me, at least, I don't know if this is a big cultural difference to talk about, but for me, at least, I feel like life over there is a lot more peaceful, at least from what I've seen from when I've been there. Everything here is very fast-paced. You know, you have to constantly be working or going to school or doing what you have to do. And then over there, I feel like, you know, you get a lot of time to kind of just relax. There's a lot more nature, I'd say. It's less urbanized. And so I'd feel like, you know, it's a lot more peaceful just being there.
Yeah, I think Sri Lanka is known for its beauty in terms of nature.
Yeah.
If you have any pictures, we'd love to post them on our Instagram so that people can see the beauty of Sri Lanka.
Yeah.
So usually the last part of the podcast jumps into some fun facts about your culture and learning more about it. Before we get into that, my only exposure to Sri Lanka honestly is through movies, and those are not even Tamil movies. But what I've seen is just lots of green hills, people picking tea leaves in the fields, and then like a train going through all of that. Would you say that's an accurate depiction?
The Green Hills, yes, pretty accurate. I do know that Sri Lanka is famous for its tea, but I personally have not seen, like, you know, the tea fields and people picking the tea leaves. Although, you know, maybe it could be happening. I just personally have not seen it. And the trains are everywhere. Yeah.
Is that the main form of transportation?
No, most people there drive motorcycles, and they also have rickshaws, which are kind of like their taxis to get around. And a couple people have cars as well.
Okay, it's very similar to Pakistan then. I think motorcycles are also a lot more affordable than cars over there. So
oh yeah, sure.
Like everyone's go-to first form of transportation.
Yeah, no, it's not as safe, but
yeah,
definitely more affordable.
There's no law to wear helmets. Honestly, okay, I don't know if this is true in Sri Lanka, but when I went to Pakistan, I saw that the men would sit normally and the woman was expected to sit sideways on the motorcycle at this like really dangerous angle to sort of half hold on.
Yeah, I've definitely seen that. I don't know if that's an expectation or that's just how they sit. That's just what they're used to, but yeah, I've definitely seen that as well.
When we were talking earlier about the Tamil Fest, you mentioned that there was cultural food, clothing, performances. So I wanted to get into the specifics of that.
In terms of clothing, we don't have things that are specifically from Sri Lanka, but it's just things that are relevant to us, part of Tamil culture.
What are some outfits that are in Tamil culture?
For women, we have saris, which I'm sure anyone from South Asia probably knows what they look like. We also have dhotis for men, something that goes around your waist. It's formal. It's like white and has like a gold stripe on it.
You mentioned that you don't know about specifically Sri Lankan clothing, but you know about Tamil clothing. What area is Tamil?
There's been a war in Sri Lanka. They mostly live in the northern part of Sri Lanka. There's a province called Jaffna, which is where most Tamil people come from. Other than that, you know, they're scattered throughout the country.
Is there a different culture that also exists in Sri Lanka?
In majority, you have also the Sinhalese people, and then there are a couple other cultures.
In general, there are multiple cultures making up the country.
Yeah, I'd say so.
And then there are also some people from those cultures who are living outside of Sri Lanka.
The Tamil people, for example, yes, they live in a lot of different parts of the world. Because of the war, they had to immigrate to other countries. So also, like the most southern part of India, it's known as Tamil Nadu or Chennai, which is also where most Tamil people come from, actually.
So your culture is Sri Lankan and Tamil culture.
I just go with Tamil culture because, like, you know, they had like an entire genocide. I can't say I know too much about it, but there's definitely been a lot of people who were forced to leave the country because of the war.
Thank you for letting me know about that because I was about to call you Sri Lankan. Should I just call you Tamil? That's it?
Yeah, you could go with the Canadian Tamil or Tamil Canadian, either one.
Growing up, all I thought was Sri Lankan, Tamil, same thing. Yeah. And then maybe a bit of India, but majority Sri Lankan.
No, I'd say the majority is in southern India, and then there's also some in Sri Lanka as well.
Okay, so what are some Tamil dishes that you know of?
So we have dosa, that's a big one, which is kind of like a crepe, but not sweet, made with rice flour, lentil flour. We mix that with a lot of different spices, add ghee on there, dip it in anything, like any curry, chutney, anything like that. We also do
Okay.
have kothi roti, which personally is my favorite food. It's basically just a roti chopped up into pieces, and you can add your choice of meat. You can add chicken, goat, and covered in gravy, eggs, onions, chili peppers. Yeah, it's really good.
That sounds delicious.
Yes.
I've never heard of that before. Is there any spot in Toronto that you know that serves authentic Tamil food?
I want to say there's a pretty good number, at least in Scarborough, of just Tamil takeout places where you can get any Tamil food.
So, we talked about how you have Tamil films as well. Are there any specific films that you like or anything related to film from the Tamil culture?
I wouldn't say there's anything specifically that I want to mention, but the Tamil films are made in southern India. It's funny because although we're also Tamil, there's still some differences culturally, I'd say, in terms of just the way the language is spoken, the dialect, some of the slang. It's cool to see how there's a lot of similarities, but also differences that you can find in movies and TV shows.
Do you know of any films or shows that accurately represent your Tamil culture, or are they all pretty much Indian Tamil culture?
I personally haven't really seen anything that depicts our culture.
Okay, so here's what you need to do. You need to find a group, and one of you is going to become the cameraman, one of you is going to be on the boom mic, a couple of you are going to be on screen, and you guys are going to make the first accurate Tamil film, alright?
If only any of us could act, that would be great, but I don't think we have the the talent required for that.
There are a lot of people in the industry who don't know how to act.
That's true. That is true.
Okay, what about Tamil music then? Is it also pretty much Indian Tamil music, or is there anything that's more closely associated with your culture?
No, mostly because most of the music we listen to are from those movies. It's pretty much the same thing. I have seen a couple independent Tamil artists, but most music that people listen to is from the movies.
What type of music is that?
Honestly, there's so many different genres of music. Pretty much anything you can think of. Like, you have your classical South Asian music, but then you also have things that are more infused with Western genres, things that are more like, hip-hop or rock music. I'd say there's like a good mix of all genres.
And would you say that Tamil films are also a good mix of different genres?
I think in recent years there have been more movies coming out from different genres. I've noticed an increase in thrillers or like mysteries. But growing up, most of the movies I watched were either pure action movies or rom-coms maybe, but now I think there's a good mix.
I've heard that apparently the Bollywood industry has stolen most of their ideas from Tamil movies. Have you ever seen an idea in another movie and be like, hey, we did that first?
I'll be honest, I've maybe only seen 2 or 3 Bollywood movies in my life, and those were from when I was a little kid, so I can't really speak to that, but I've also heard similar things.
Also, there's this song that I know. It's by this actor called Tanush. Have you heard of him?
Oh, yeah.
It's called Why This Color Very D.
Yeah, that's the one. That song went viral back when it came out.
Yeah, I was a kid and I saw it, and I didn't even know that it was in Tamil. I just knew that it was catchy, and it was very popular on Pakistani media, or all media. I was like, how did it reach there? But
I think pretty viral just because a lot of the lyrics were in English.
yeah, that would make sense. Did you see the movie that it was in?
I watched it years later.
Was it a good movie?
It was definitely a different movie. It was by a guy who's bipolar. Usually, like our movies, we don't really focus on things like that. So I'd say it was definitely different. It's called Munu or 3.
Okay. Could you give me a name of a movie that's more like a classic Tamil movie, and then one that you feel like is more progressive?
Yeah, no, I mean, you're going to speak of Tamil movies, probably heard of Rajinikanth.
Yes.
Yeah, he's probably, one of the biggest actors in India. So I'd say his movie Padayappa is definitely a classic. In terms of progressive, though.
Or just something different from the classic movies.
Yeah, so in terms of difference, like I said, there's more like genres popping up now. So there's a movie called Rakshasan, which is crime, mystery, but like also a little bit of horror, and it's a thriller, and it's pretty good. It's just definitely not something that I expected.
Lots of plot twists.
Yeah.
And also, you mentioned that dance was a very big part of your culture. And when I was growing up, the little Tamil community that I had in my school, every cultural event that would happen, they would have this whole routine. They would be up there dressed up and everything, and they were rehearsed and so good. I mean, what would you say in terms of the impact of dance on your culture, and what are some kinds of dances that come from the Tamil area?
I think the dance that you're most likely speaking thinking of is called Bharatanatyam. It's our most popular form of classical dance.
It was like very elegant.
It's very focused on not just your physical movements, but also like your expressions.
And would you say that dance is a very big part of Tamil culture?
If you're looking at the arts, I'd say Bharatanatyam is definitely up there as one of the most impactful forms of art. Carnatic music is a big thing. Certain instruments and like certain types of drums that are also very important. One is the taval. It's made out of animal skin.
Is there any other way you can think of how people can connect with your culture while living in Toronto or in Canada?
I'd say exposure is a very big thing. Keeping yourself surrounded with people who are in touch with the culture, who can teach you things like cultural traditions, and then also passing on those traditions to younger generations is a very big part of keeping the culture going. Yeah.
All right, that is a wrap. Thank you so much, Abbi, for agreeing to speak on this podcast. Honestly, I learned a lot, and being from South Asia, I'm surprised that I was so unaware of such an important part of South Asian culture. So thank you for that.
Oh, for sure. And, thank you for doing this. I think it's very important that people are aware and they understand about other cultures. So I think this is a great way for other people to learn. So yeah, thank you.
You taught me at the start how to say hi, and you said that it's the same thing as saying bye. Just give me a reminder again. How do you say bye again in Tamil?
So for that, we would say vanakkam.
Vanakkam.
Yes.
Okay. Have a nice day. Vanakkam.
Thank you. Nandri. Vanakkam.
That concludes this episode of Hand the Mic Over. Thank you so much for listening to and supporting our podcast. Be sure to check out our YouTube channel, Hand the Mic Over, or check us out on Spotify, also Hand the Mic Over. If you'd like to see some pictures and hear some music from today's podcast, then check us out on Instagram. Our handle is Hand the Mic Over.